All right. So how are you? Good? Happy? Optimistic? Well, that's good, because there's no shortage of dystopian future scenarios. And even though this is fiction, we are in fact facing some pretty challenging, not to say grim, problems. And these are global concerns. And some people say it's technology's fault, whereas others claim that technology might be the only solution. Now, either way, we are a society under construction and on the brink of an infrastructure paradigm shift. And those shifts occur now and then throughout history, and they drastically change a large number of people's reality and society itself. And as designers, we need to be able to deploy into new territories and address problems that our classical toolbox might not be optimized for. So as most people in this room know, we live in a service-providing economy. 70 to 80% of our economy is comprised of services, and as the economical standard around the world increases, the service portion will increase in other parts of the world as well, as we just heard, actually. So, for example, you no longer own the CD. Spotify and other services give you access in the devices and places where you require the service. So CarPlay on your phone, at home streaming through Echo or Sonos, or on your sports watch with an adaptive beats per minute count on your music to match your running speed, for example. And now data-rich platforms and algorithms affect not only digital services, but creep into the physical spaces and infrastructure as well. For example, a lot of people have replaced car ownership with on-demand access. So the creepy but cool actor Uber and Lyft and other actors in that space are doing to car ownership what Spotify did to CD ownership. So consider the service experience of Lyft or Uber or any such actor. The GPS, the phone app, the traffic data, PayPal, and the rest of their tech stack allow for an almost magical service experience. So with a few gestures, I can just conjure a vehicle and a driver right where I am. And I don't even have to be home at midnight. So this both makes and actually breaks their infrastructure. And that's why it's called disruptive. It has elements of creation as well as destruction tied to it. So we are replacing physical assets with information and data. And this is one of the data-driven, AI-powered network platform effects that provides a new context for service design. I think I got all the buzzwords in one sentence there. So the next wave of services is increasingly AI-powered. And as more and more aspects of AI are getting commoditized, we see completely new kinds of services emerge. Such services that allows us to outsource the service to an object and act on our behalf. So here we see a poacher detecting service that combines machine learning and game theory in order to predict the likelihood of where poachers might hunt, and that guides the surveillance drones that in turn can alert the rangers to take action when needed. And closer to home, a Swedish farmer can use the CropSat service to zoom in and define her field, as you can see there, and get the vegetation index from the satellite and download a customized configuration file to her autonomous fertilizer. And the file modifies the dose using the GPS of the tractor as it moves across the field to match the soil variation. So we're at this tipping point because of cheap mobile computers, cloud services, machine learning APIs, and open data standards. So hundreds of millions of people are using affordable technology such as phones to send information to each other at zero, almost zero marginal cost. So the internet is obviously no longer something that provides your browser access to media content. It unlocks real-world services. And if we don't design our way through this paradigm shift carefully, we are in trouble. Because the famous invisible hand also happens to be blind. So without purpose and meaning, we are lost. So all revolutions, the cognitive, the agricultural, and the three previous industrial revolutions, they all break some things and they create other things. The freeways and the privately owned car, for example, that was part of the previous shift, they wrecked cities and towns, but gave rise to shopping malls and the sprawl. And this move into the real physical world in the wake of data-driven AI, powered by tens of billions of sensors, the estimates differ a little, it's hard to count all of them, means that not only software, but ubiquitous technology is quite literally eating the world. And this will, and does already, greatly affect our infrastructure on a global level. So infrastructures is not a national issue predominantly anymore. So we as designers, we have a responsibility to humanize technology for positive societal impact. That means that we might need to reinvent and recombine our toolbox to ask the right questions and cater for these new design spaces. So some of the tools we use, like the service blueprint. How many use service blueprints? They were created for and in a different era. Do you know what the original shoeshine stand blueprint when it was published? No one? So it's 1984, and just to calibrate, that's the same year we experienced this stuff. So as designers, we might want to update our tool setup to quickly reach those new territories and make a difference there. So here are 4 strategies or moves to approach a new toolbox. So obviously create new tools. That's the first one. So one new territory is, like I was mentioning, AI-driven services. So the first thing would be to incorporate data scientists and machine learning experts in the teams. That should be a no-brainer. But also to use human-centered design to take the artificial out of AI. AI will only be authentic when it feels sympathetic and useful, that is, when it has a warm heart. If it feels artificial, it will never stick. As Christina Vodka phrased it, come on people, these algos are freaking me out. We need a little humanity here. So a new tool for this space is this design canvas for augmented service platforms that we are putting to use. And with it, we can connect the notions of algorithm impact and enhance resources and data management that augment human workers and operators in order to create those magic user experiences on a network platform of services. So it helps us ask the right questions and frame the problem. So this canvas is tool making in the process, in progress, so the next time we meet, it might look different. But of course, we'll make sure you can download it and play with it and modify it if you want. So we are currently using this in a healthcare context to empower both physicians and patients to high quality treatment. It's also applied and developed in the context of public sector services with implications for municipality governance and education. So just as AI without a heart won't work, we know that places, physical human spaces, won't work without being linked to context and culture. As we move further out from interactions and services to context and culture, things get really complex. And as soon as we start talking about culture, things get very complicated fast. So here the key, I think, is to create simple tools for continuous learning through experimentation. Because in complex systems, you really don't understand the system until you start changing it. But changing large complex system is not easily done. In a city, for example, you can't just tear down a building and replace it, or build a new road just to test things. We need smarter ways to learn that still answer our key questions. So one example is how we worked with the city of Denver for an interactive social installation in a public space. And this is the second time Jenny makes a cameo appearance today. I just realized. So this is Jenny, and with the help of a piece of tape, some cardboard, mirrors, and that inflatable Earth globe, Jenny and David learned a lot of things regarding both physical and social distances and spaces, as well as interactive features that could not have been discovered in a conference room or a focus group interview. So a good tool doesn't only help you answer questions you prepared beforehand, it should also allow you to improvise and answer questions you didn't even know you had. So learning through improvisation is just as important as learning through experimentation. So we discover new answers and new questions constantly as designers. And that's nothing new per se. And the prototyping toolbox, so to speak, is fairly big already. Body storming, service role plays, physical prototyping, and a wide range of digital prototyping tools are available already. So I'd just like to mention sort of a meta tool that exemplifies the simplicity move. Are you ready? Oh, that's okay. Well, so behold, the checklist. So I know this is not the level of innovation you expected, but as you know, the devil is in the details. So this particular checklist does two important things. It keeps track of all those weird experiments that the design team carries out. So it's a way of getting an overview of what we learn at a glance, and it helps us quickly document what we learn. But it's also a way to ask the right questions in the right order and visualize the status. So untested, planned, in progress, and verified. So it's a planning tool as well as a documentation tool. And as you can see, very simple as well. But to handle the complexity and culture, we also need participation and collaboration. So how do we make sure that the affected end user's voice are explicit and active in the design of public infrastructure? So as we already heard, we see an increasing willingness, let's say, from governments and public sector to engage in experimenting and a higher degree of involvement. And this is where user-centered and participatory design methods can help. So it's very encouraging that the Swedish government actually put this participatory aspect in their latest proposition for built environments. So I just translated a snippet. The role of the architect and designer should be developed through cross-disciplinary collaboration. And the decision makers and client from the public sector, private sector, and organizations should develop their knowledge in order to use these opportunities. But how can we do this? So this leads us to the next development move, the acceptation move. So far, we've talked about design tools that serve the designer primarily. But we also need to empower people through organizing for collaboration. And this is important because the web of stakeholders involved can be very complex. So a lot of people with different skill sets, roles, and agendas need to be able to communicate and collaborate. So when entering a new territory such as that, like urban planning, we can test how human-centered service design tools perform there. And this is what's known as acceptation. It's a word taken from biology, which means that the original function gives rise to new effects when moved to a different situation or environment, such as bird feathers started out as temperature regulation and then give rise to flight. So in a research project with Halmstad University and architect firm Krok och Tjäder, we used a staple tool, the impact map, in an urban development project focused on new housing in the Swedish town Laholm. And we did an action research project where I worked as a service designer and a researcher with the architects to explore how the impact map methodology can be put to use in that context. So long story short, it worked. And for you, those of you who don't know, this is an impact map really far away, so you wouldn't be able to read. Closer, it's more useful. The impact map performed as predicted. Authentic qualitative user or citizen research, I should say, allowed us to map human behavior to desirable impact for the people, the city, and the surrounding neighborhoods. But not only did we make the citizen's voice explicit in the process, we also learned that this particular tool was useful in another way. So in the debriefing interviews with the architects, they made it clear that the impact map helped them bridge their communication between various stakeholders in the city office on the one hand and the builders and contractors on the other hand. So it worked as a boundary object that strengthened the architects and the urban planners' ability to present, communicate, and argue for human-centered design solution. And this tends to be forgotten otherwise. So that's pretty cool, I think, and a win for human-centered design methodology in the physical space. So it's an example of how a tool in a different setting allowed us to achieve new types of outcome for urban planners and architects in this case. And if you're not familiar with how impact maps work, there are plenty of resources available for learning. But in essence, the impact map is really useful when answering the questions why, how, and what. Now, for services and interaction in the physical space, time and spatial, or space, becomes important. So this requires us also to answer the questions when and where. And that leads me to the fourth move. So tools can be great by themselves, but it's when we combine them we can really reap some benefits. So combining the impact map with, for example, the customer journey map is pretty great, because the customer journey map is a tool that really shines with its timeline and the channel and place matrix, answering the questions when and where. So together they give a complete holistic view, right? So are we done then? Is this the perfect tool setup? Are we done then? No, not really. Because there are two interesting forces at play here. A lot of smart people have explored these forces and call them by different names. But I think ontological design and the media effects, etc., do a good job of describing what I mean. So I don't know how many of you have studied ontological design, but there's a classical notion there that says what we make shapes us back. And in the built spaces context, Winston Churchill famously said, we shape our buildings, and afterwards our buildings shape us. This means that the tools we design affect what we design, and that in turn shapes us back, requiring us to create new tools for the world we just created. Are you still with me? It's soon lunch. So the other force at play here is Marshall McLuhan's tetrad of media effects, or the laws of media. And this tells us that there is no such thing as the best tool. And even a tool that is good in a certain time or context will just overextend and transform into something else. So think of the concept of owning a car. So that enhanced the freedom of a lot of people a couple of years ago. And now, for some people, it has actually reversed. And some people feel trapped when sitting in traffic jams, or they can even feel trapped by owning a big expensive car that just rusts away on the parking lot. Or the smartphone. You all have one. What was the promise of the smartphone when it was released first, like 2005? Yeah, we had smartphones before the iPhone. What was its promise? Oh, you don't know, you just got one, right? So productivity, it was a productivity tool. You can email on the go. What is it now? Well, the smartphone is the opposite. It's now viewed as such a distraction tool that we install apps on it that hinders us from using our smartphones as a productivity tool. And we do this in order to be more productive. That's bordering insanity, I think. So this is the reverses into principle at work. There's no constant position for the tools that we design and use. So either tool X is not good enough yet, but on its way to become a good tool, or it is good, and therefore, by this theory, on its way to become ill-fitted by overextension. So in a fast-changing world of new territories, we need to create new design tools and models. And maybe by using those 4 moves I just talked about. If we do this, we have a better chance of defining the future, because we are facing a set of great changes. And design is about the belief that other futures are possible. So the end game is not about the tools themselves, of course. If we don't put it all in the right frame, you end up being the person who makes customer journey maps instead of the one who helps organizations become more human-centric. The design tools we create should help us ask the right questions so that we can find our why, our purpose. And finding the purpose is not important to make stuff happen, it's also the foundation for where we as a society will go. So returning to where we started, with our responsibility to humanize technology and define better futures, take the notion of ontological design to heart. We are where we are because of what we designed. It shaped us back. So no matter how grim some problems may seem, rest assured that we were actually made for solving them. Thank you for your time and attention.
Don't hide over there.
Okay.
Hey, Pontus.
Hello.
Are you
Pontus, good?
Yeah, I'm
Everything
good.
feeling fine?
Yeah, I'm optimistic.
Comfortable?
Yeah.
Good.
So the tools we use, they shape the things that we make. The things we make shape us.
Yeah.
What tools have you made that have shaped you?
Shaped me as outside of work.
Outside of work would be interesting.
Okay.
Yes.
You as a human.
Okay. So a couple of years ago, when I went backpacking, I would put on sturdy hiking boots and grab a backpack weighing 25 kilograms or 30 kilograms and just trailblaze, right? So I was walking along this path, sweaty and tired and looking at all those beautiful mountains, and then I realized, if I want the freedom on the trail, why do I have to carry 25 kilograms of gear on my back? So I started cutting out and asking those questions, right? Do I need a tent? Do I need rain gear? And no, you don't, because you can use those moves to reconfigure your gear. So instead of having a tent and rain gear and a sleeping pad, you can just have your rain poncho and pitch that as a shelter. And now I'm down to 4.2 kilograms on the pack, which means I can have a new type of backpack, allowing me to run, because I don't need the sturdy hiking boots anymore. I can exchange them for trail running. So the context changes. So I'm not hiking anymore, I'm running. So just the other week, actually, we did 2 marathons with a sleepover.
Okay, so then it's definitely a tool that shape you.
Yeah, and also the social context, because of the people who want to join that kind of thing. Yeah.
What are those people?
Well, we
Are
have
you
one
here?
here.
Mad
Marcus
women.
is here. Yeah,
Double marathon.
That's very, very cool.
that's
So
one example.
Pontus, I was thinking you're used to working with people that aren't that used to service design approaches, that aren't used to working with design, and with all the tools that we provide. What have you personally found difficult or challenging entering these contexts?
You know, Jared put it all to rest for me, because it is when the teams and the organizations are at those different maturity scales. So identify that weakest link. So there's not a particular sector or industry or branch that is more or less. That's really dependent on the teams. So I've been in public sector where people are really mature in the design thinking, and in other departments that are not. And so I think that model that we just heard this morning was really great in putting that to identify what the problem really is.
So it's more about your team and the people you're working with than the context.
Always about the people.
What would you advise someone embarking on a project like this, where you can expect to encounter people that are quite immature working with design approaches?
Oh, I guess Jared answered that too, or didn't he? No, but I think making sure that we work on different fronts. Like first, try to get everybody up to speed. So you can't have one elite designer running away and take the lead and leave the rest behind. So we need to move forward as a group, but also re-examining what tools are we actually using. Are they useful? Do we need to create new tools? So sometimes I think about what I read when the Pixar movies are made. In that process, a significant portion of the project is actually building the rendering tool for that particular movie. So they spend a lot, invest a lot in the actual tool making. And I think that's something we do, but we don't talk about it enough, I think.
So Pontus, lunch. How do you want to spend lunch?
Eating. No, I want to talk to people.
That's good.
Okay, then I just found the perfect gadget for you.
Oh, great. A new tool.
A new tool for you. It's pretty simple. It's this yellow spot. Let's put it on you, and that just helps you magically stimulate the conversation out here.
Cool. Great.